Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. So I'm in Kensington, London, on Kensington Church Street. Opposite you can see this very high-end wine bar, the Kensington Wine Rooms. Now, this location played a significant part in the Mueller investigation in the whole Hillary's email scandal. Because in May 2016, George Papadopoulos was in London. I'm not quite sure why. He was a senior figure in the Trump campaign. And Papadopoulos arranged to meet Alexander Downer, who was the Australian High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, i.e. ambassador. Commonwealth countries have high commissioners to each other, not ambassadors. So Downer's from a very distinguished family. I can't quite remember the particulars, like his grandfather was Premier of one of the Australian states. His father was Australian High Commissioner here. So Downer went to school university here. Alexander Downer was a politician, was Foreign Minister of Australia and later High Commissioner here, the same post his father had held. So Papadopoulos met him here and unwisely vouchsafed that the Russian government were going to be very helpful to the Republicans by disclosing thousands of emails that they'd hacked from the Democratic National Committee and indeed Hillary Clinton personally, and this was going to be highly disobliging to the Democrats and cause them such extraordinary embarrassment that would propel Trump to victory. Now, Alexander Downer considered it his duty to disclose this to the Australian Central Intelligence Organization, who then passed it on to their American colleagues. And that's, anyway, so there we are. So Papadopoulos lied about all this. He was questioned under oath by the FBI. He later fessed up, admitted that he had perjured himself and was found guilty. I can't remember what his penalty was for that, but Papadopoulos, he seems to have fallen out of the story. People are not paying attention to him. Well, when this opens, that's where it is, here on Kensington Church Street, in a very plush area of London. Perhaps show that he was a bit of a naif to tell Downer that. We presumably didn't think Downer was going to pass it on. Was Downer a bit of a rat for doing so? I don't know. But so that's why certain people concluded that the Russian Federation was assisting the Trump campaign. Why? What was in it for them? What was Trump promising to do in return for them? Well, there was a talk about, it was a meeting about orphans in Trump Tower with Donald Trump Jr. Well, that's partly true. When he met Miss Veselnitskaya, it's because there was the Magnitsky Act after this Russian lawyer who was killed by neglect in prison. And then was falsely accused of stealing millions of dollars, despite living very modestly and having no proof that he had millions of dollars. He was convicted after his death. Yeah, a post-mortem conviction. A couple of years after his death, they put a dead person on trial. This makes it even more farcical. There's always a cage in a Russian courtroom, and the defendant has to sit in a cage just to make him look even more guilty, just to prejudice the trial a bit more. And the cage is guarded. There was no one in the cage because the defendant had died, but it was still guarded by police officers. What, in case a ghost would escape? This is how ludicrous this system of injustice is. But anyway, so that was the Magnitsky Act, sanctions of various top Russian officials, and it really hurt the pro-Putin elite. So they decided to hit back because quite a few Americans adopted Russian children. They particularly adopted disabled children or children who suffer from various diseases, who were often very poorly cared for by the Russian state. So Putin said he would not allow Americans to adopt Russian children, which is therefore going to hurt the most vulnerable in Russian society, people utterly helpless, children who are born with severe disabilities or who are suffering some terrible diseases. So he took it out on them. He would rather make them suffer even more than have a modicum of justice in his own country, like fair trials or anything like that. So the idea was the Magnitsky Act would be repealed, and in return, Americans would be allowed to adopt Russian children again. Right? So when they said we were discussing adoption, presumably that will have been part of it. Why? What was the quid pro quo? Well, what they're going to get in return is the Magnitsky Act repealed, as in that the sanctions on certain sections of Russian society, which would obviously boost the economy and particularly help the kleptocrats who are Putin's cronies. That's enough for me. Toodaloo.